Hi, I'm Ken Ham. In these difficult times when the Bible is under increasing attack, I'm so encouraged to know there's a well-produced TV series like Wretched. From the TV program's title to Todd's unique style to the Bible teaching, there's nothing being produced like Wretched. So please support this non-profit ministry with a generous gift. It's now tax-deductible. More than ever, we need ministries like this one. It deserves your support. Thank you.
Just send your dilemma to dilemma@wretched.tv and we will do our best not to share our opinion, but bring the Bible to help us answer the pressing and confusing questions of life. Here we go with nose rings. I had my nose pierced last summer and my pastor very rudely told me to remove it. He compared it to having tattoos and wearing flip-flops with miniskirts to church. Isn't what's in my heart or the fact that I'm actually in church more important than what I look like? That is a load of questions. Let's see what the Bible says. Seems to me that nose rings are indeed like tattoos. They are also like swearing. In Ephesians 4, at the very end of the chapter, going into Ephesians 5, verses 3 and 4, we are warned to not use coarse language, crude jokes. Those are not the words that should come flying out of the mouth of a Christian who has been regenerated. The question, of course, is, when is a filthy word a filthy word? The answer to that question is, it depends on the culture. Frankly, it depends on the country. There are words that we use in America that we shouldn't use in Great Britain and vice versa. Who determines what is a coarse word? The culture does. Now, that seems pretty simple. Oh, so if this particular word has a negative connotation, people see it as something that is foul, filthy, or lowly, then we shouldn't use it. That's true, but here's the challenge. Here's the conundrum. To different people, different words have different values. That's right. To some people, using a variation of the F-bomb is perfectly acceptable. And yet, I suspect to my generation, it kind of causes us to go, it's just too close to that really strong, harsh word. Don't use it. There's another word, for instance, that I hear used all the time by a different generation. It is what one does to a lollipop to get to the center of the Tootsie Roll Tootsie Pop. They use it to describe the circumstance they're in, how they're feeling, how they interpret an event. And I find it to be a coarse word, but that generation doesn't. So is it or isn't it? The answer to that question, I think, depends on where that word happens to be at in the season. If the overwhelming majority of folks, they now accept what used to be considered a coarse word as a perfectly fine word, then it's a perfectly fine word. But if there's a group of people who could hear that word and go, ooh, I'm offended by that, then we shouldn't be using it. This isn't a perfect rule, but it is a rule that I believe also applies to tattoos. Is a tattoo a good thing or a bad thing? Now, I know you're thinking the Bible verse that says in the Old Testament that people shouldn't have body markings. I believe those were in association with what? Pagan practices. If you marked up your body in that way, you were participating in a pagan practice. Is that what body art is today? I don't think so. So I think the issue of tattoos is either or. It's adiaphora. So how does the Christian decide if he or she should get one or not? Same rule that we had about swearing. Is there a group of people that is still alive today that thinks that tattoos have a very negative connotation? I'm not saying a pagan practice. Now, if you go to South Africa, as a rule, if you have a tattoo, you've just said, I'm into witchcraft, sorcery, divination. But let's just take America, Canada, even Australia, England. If you get a tattoo for a younger generation, not a problem. However, there's an older demographic that goes, what do you think you're doing here? If that's the case, I would then lovingly say to that younger generation, you need to be mindful of those folks. You need to be willing to give up your liberty because you don't want to offend. You don't want to put up a stumbling block, and you don't want to do something that causes anybody to go, what's the matter with you? What do you think you're doing? You're besmirching your testimony. Yes, I said besmirching. That is something that needs to be kept in mind. Whether it is using certain language, whether it is getting a tattoo, or whether it is putting in a nose ring. What does this say to people? What is the perception of culture? Whatever the percentages are, whether we've got a Barna pew poll for this or not, what is the perception of my culture? What will they think of me as a Christian if I mark up my body, certain words come flying out, or I put a ring in my nose? You see, the Bible, I think, would suggest that culturally at that time, nose rings were fine. No, really, Ezekiel 16:12, God said to the nation of Israel, I loved you, I made you beautiful. How? He mentions some lists of jewelry, that what I've clothed you in, including jewelry, rings on your fingers, and a ring in your nose. That was considered an adornment. And yet, I suspect out of the tens and tens of people watching this here Wretched program, they're going, nose ring? You shouldn't have a nose ring. It makes you look like fill in the blank. Well, it didn't in the Old Testament. And God certainly seemed to authorize nose rings and say, I gave one to the nation of Israel, a symbolic language to say I made you beautiful. And it wasn't a condemnation of nose rings. So what do? We return to swear words, to tattoos, and then we answer the question about nose rings. What does this say? What does the world think about this? What is the perception? And most importantly, what does it do to my testimony if it causes anybody to look at you and go, I don't want to listen to your gospel. You got a ring in your nose, because that's how they feel about it. Then the Christian should be more concerned about being able to preach the gospel without attaching a stumbling block than adorning their nose. In other words, we've got an issue of adiaphora. We've got freedom, we've got liberty, and yet we do not use that liberty to do anything we want. We're more mindful about preaching the gospel than we are as to how we feel about swearing, tattoos, and nose rings. Thank you for watching our daily clip. Don't know if you realize this, but because of Wretched, there are no more rising tides. The temperature is stabilized and no seals are being beaten with clubs, all thanks to us at Wretched. We sure would appreciate your support in our ongoing efforts to save small kittens. Would you please visit wretched.org? We'll keep bringing daily TV shows, daily radio programs, but we can't do it without your support. We've now opened up the website so everybody has access to all of these archives for free. But we really need your support to continue doing that. So if you love puppies, please visit wretched.org.